Are we any closer tonight to a solution to the government shutdown or the debt ceiling standoff and the real definition of default? This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. There is plenty of talking at each other, but little talking to each other as we begin a second week of partial government shutdown. The president and Democrats are insisting on a no-strings-attached budget. Republicans want concessions on spending and Obamacare. So far, neither side is giving an inch as we head to a bigger battle. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry tells us where we are tonight.
President Obama visited FEMA headquarters to blame Republicans for shutting the government down while a tropical storm was brewing this weekend. And he tried to call House Speaker John Boehner's bluff on his claim Sunday there are not enough votes to reopen the government without changing the health care law.
If Republicans and Speaker Boehner are saying there are not enough votes, then they should prove it. Let the bill go to the floor and let's see what happens. Just vote.
Boehner aides quickly noted the president could throw his support behind a bill they already passed to get the 86% of the FEMA workforce that's been furloughed back to work. And the speaker also warned Sunday the nation is on the path to default because the president will not consider any add-ons to legislation lifting the nation's debt ceiling.
The votes are not in the House to pass a clean debt limit. And the president is risking default by not having a conversation with us.
White House spokesman Jay Carney fired back. The president is not going to fund FEMA and other agencies in a piecemeal fashion, and flat out charged Boehner is prepared to wreck the economy simply because of internal party tensions with conservatives.
He will not raise the debt ceiling if Republicans do not get what they want. That's highly reckless and irresponsible.
That allegation came just hours after top White House economic advisor Gene Sperling spoke at a Politico breakfast and launched what Boehner quickly labeled an irresponsible attack.
The president strongly believes that if he were to sanction negotiations with those threatening default, that would actually increase, not decrease, the chances that we as a country undermine our full faith and credit.
Really? The president, I'm going to say this again, a senior White House staffer this morning said that the president would rather default on our debt than to sit down and negotiate. Now, the American people expect when their leaders have differences, and we're in a time of crisis, that we'll sit down and at least have a conversation.
That conversation is still stalled as Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid pushed forward today with a one-year extension to the debt ceiling, plus an immediate reopening of the government with no concessions from Democrats.
So I asked the Speaker, why are you afraid? Are you afraid this measure will pass, the government will reopen, and Americans will realize you took the country hostage for no apparent reason?
Except there was a tiny breakthrough today when aides left the door open to the president signing extensions to the debt ceiling and opening the government for just a few weeks to create the space for broader budget talks.
If there's a shorter-term debt ceiling lift, will the president sign it?
Again, I'm not going to negotiate. We think that the Congress ought to raise the debt ceiling without drama or delay. If they do that, that's a great thing.
Now, Democrats tonight are touting a new Washington Post ABC News poll suggesting 7 in 10 Americans disapprove of the way the Republicans have handled this, although 51% say the same of the president and 61% say the same of congressional Democrats. So the blame is being spread around. Brett.
Much more on this with the panel. Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. There's no shortage of hyperbole tonight about the prospect of a government default. Is that possible? A true default? How much of the hype is just hype and how much of it is real? Fox Business Network correspondent Rich Edson looks at that question tonight.
Catastrophic, reckless, financial consequences that could last a generation. That's the warning from the Obama administration, predicting a possible financial crisis if the United States breaches its borrowing limit. And one veteran of congressional budget negotiations agrees.
No, Jack Lew's right. I think people who say nothing bad will happen as long as we continue to pay our sovereign debt on time and in full really are very short-sighted.
The Treasury Department says the U.S. will be unable to pay all its bills after October 17th. Other calculations give the government an additional week or so to raise its borrowing limit. The Bipartisan Policy Center says the government pays about 100 million bills a month. Their report says between October 18th and mid-November, the government will take in enough revenue to pay about $222 billion worth of bills, leaving it with more than $100 billion short over that time. Even so, as long as the government pays the interest on the federal debt, about $35 billion over that period, some analysts argue the U.S. would avoid a debt default and the dire consequences the administration predicts.
You know, the chances of us not paying our debts or defaulting on our debts is about as high as the Earth getting hit by an asteroid. So the posturing that goes on here, I think, is a bit overdone. Certainly the most important is the payment of interest on government debt, which is sort of the technical default, and I think we will come well short of coming anywhere near that particular consequence.
Some in Congress are pushing proposals requiring the Treasury Department to pay interest obligations first in any debt ceiling breach. Opponents say that could mean the U.S. would choose to pay foreign creditors over veterans and senior citizens. And the administration argues the United States, the government of the world's reserve currency, cannot afford to miss any of its payments.
There's no good solution if you can't pay all your bills. And the United States government is not just another party. It is the gold standard in terms of what full faith and credit means.
With little indication of a debt ceiling solution, U.S. markets remain only a few percentage points off their all-time highs. Many of the consequences of a U.S. debt ceiling breach are up to international investors. If they lose confidence in the U.S., taxpayers will pay much more to borrow money, an expensive proposition when the government is borrowing hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Brett?
Rich, thank you. Stocks were down today. The Dow lost 136. The S&P 500 dropped 14. The Nasdaq fell 37. Now to international news. A longtime fugitive al-Qaeda leader is in U.S. custody. A Kenyan operator for the al-Shabaab group evaded capture, but his fate is still uncertain tonight. Those are the headlines from 2 special operations raids over the weekend in North Africa. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has the latest from the Pentagon.
2 daring operations involving elite U.S. Special Operations Forces in 2 African countries to capture, not kill, 2 alleged al-Qaeda operatives. In Somalia, the Navy's SEAL Team 6 came ashore near the town of Barawe. Their target, Abdul Qadir Mohammed, alias Ikrima, wanted for his role in training foreign al-Qaeda fighters and for orchestrating the attack on the Kenyan mall. The SEALs decided to pull back when a firefight erupted, and it became clear they could not capture their target alive. He remains at large. 3,000 miles away in Libya, Army Delta Force operators had more success capturing their target, Abu Anas al-Libi, wanted for his role in the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania. His son and brother reenacted for reporters how the raid went down. Libi had been on the FBI's most wanted list for more than a decade and had a $5 million bounty on his head. He was snatched by commandos near his home in Tripoli.
My father was returning from the morning prayers about 6:30 a.m. He parked his car in front of the house and there were 4 cars waiting for him.
U.S. officials confirm al-Libi is now being held on a U.S. Navy ship in the Mediterranean Sea, being interrogated by a team of CIA, FBI, and U.S. military specialists. He could be held there for weeks, then read his Miranda rights and brought to New York for trial.
He is a key al-Qaeda figure, and he is a legal and an appropriate target for the U.S. military under the authorization of the use of military force passed in September of 2001.
For the past 4 years, the president has relied on drone strikes to target terrorists. During a major policy speech in May, he appeared to be making the case for more limited use of drones and also argued that it was too dangerous to routinely put U.S. boots on the ground.
To put it another way, our operation in Pakistan against Osama bin Laden cannot be the norm. The risks in that case were immense. The likelihood of capture, although that was our preference, was remote given the certainty that our folks would confront resistance.
Former U.S. Attorney General Michael Mukasey wonders whether U.S. interrogators will have enough time with al-Libi.
But even if he's cooperating, when you gather intelligence, you have to take down what he says, double back, check it out, maybe ask him other things. And it's tough to do in a matter of weeks.
Al-Libi felt so safe in the capital, Tripoli. He traveled without security. In fact, we're told he had been living in the open in the Libyan capital since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi 2 years ago, raising the question, Brett, why grab Al-Libi now? He was tracked by U.S. forces for more than a year.
Right, Jen. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, if he didn't have security, he was out in the open, and we knew he was there, why now? Is anybody saying any answer to that?
No answer. Certainly, they will say that there were certain things that had to be lined up. You had to have permission from the president, first of all. You had to have, there's an open question of whether they had permission from the Libyan government, but no real answer why they've been tracking not only him, but also the Benghazi suspects, and why act now a year later.
Yeah, whether he had intel on something current. And as you mentioned, it also raises questions about why after more than a year they haven't captured or killed any of the Benghazi suspects.
That's right. In fact, at least 2 of the known attackers wanted by the FBI have been living in the open in Benghazi and in Libya. Reporters from the New York Times and other organizations have talked to them repeatedly, and yet none have been captured or killed, Brett.
Okay, Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Up next, Obamacare goes offline again. But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 13 in Tampa with a high school football team honoring a 2-year-old with an inoperable brain tumor. WJBK in Detroit with Michigan lawmakers who want to require that a pint of beer actually be at least 16 ounces. And this is a live look at Boston from Fox 25, our affiliate there. The big story there tonight, a rash of middle school suspensions over a racy video one student made for another. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.